Welcome in, everybody. Josh here from 8-Bit Goonies, and I'm coming at you with another movie review today. I want to look at Frankenstein Created Women. This is a classic Hammer production. All of the beautiful sets and sounds and the ambiance and the atmosphere is all there as it should be. Directed by Terence Fisher, who is a staple of the Hammer production studios, and of course starring Peter Cushing, who is, in my mind, Dr. Frankenstein. Dr. Baron Frankenstein, to be exact. He is, when I think of Frankenstein, he is the picture of the doctor that pops into my mind. So without any further ado, let's jump right in. So the film opens with an unnamed man being executed by a guillotine, and this guillotine is kind of a key to the plot. We circle back to this guillotine on more than one occasion, more than two occasions even. We'll get to that. The man's son is watching from a distance, and we see him. The preacher who's there in the man's dying hour tries to shoo away the boy, but he does come back to witness it. So we get the credits, and then we cut back to the son. He's older, and he's back at the guillotine. This is Hans. We find out he's an assistant to Dr. Hertz. Now, I'm a big fan of this character, this Dr. Hertz. He's such an interesting but fun character. Thorley Walters plays him, and he was in some of the other Hammer productions, but he does a great job in this role. We see that Dr. Frankenstein is being removed from what looks to be a coffin, and apparently he's frozen. They hook him up to some wires. We have kind of a classic lab, but it's not the true classic Frankenstein lab that we're used to. But this is a lab, as we're going to see, it's not necessarily for creating life, but it's for capturing souls. We do get a switch scene right away. He flips the switch. He has to pull it multiple times and gives Dr. Frankenstein some smelling salts, and voila, he's alive. Through some exposition, we learn that he's been dead for exactly 1 hour. And that during that time, he was able to be revived. So he, through science, finds that his soul has never left his body. So we learn that if a body is dead for an hour or less, the soul can be contained, removed, stored, something of that nature. So with the experiment a great success, they send poor Hans into town to procure a bottle of champagne to celebrate. But neither of them has any money, and neither does Hans. Hans takes the doctor's jacket, Dr. Hertz's jacket, into town. We're then introduced to Christina. She's scarred badly on one side of her face, and she walks with a limp. We're never really told exactly what happened. She's not a fan of the Baron or the doctor due to his black arts, she explains. But her and Hans have a thing going, you can tell right away. Hans trades Dr. Hertz's coat for a bottle of champagne, and he's going to take this back for the celebration. But before he could leave, we're introduced to these three aristocrats, I guess you would call them, although they don't have much money. We find out that this is Anton, Johann, and Karl. These guys are jerks, just assholes from the get-go. They order the finest wine, and they ask that it be served by the curator's daughter. They call him landlord throughout the movie. Landlord. They make fun of her as she comes out. Just horrible people, really. They threaten her father's license. If you don't, give us the wine, I will tell my father and we'll revoke your license. So basically they're just scum, using their power to extort people within town. Christina, as she's pouring the wine, she spills some on the head crony. He flips out. A fight ensues between Hans and the man. I mean, all of them start getting in blows. They start fighting. Hans grabs a knife and slices old Fancy Pants right in the face. The police show up and remove Hans, and the cronies insist that the police charge him. But surprisingly, the police actually side with Hans. They say 3 against 1 won't look so good in court now, will it? And the cronies agree, and they kind of back off. I was really surprised at this. Usually this is where we get, obviously, the powerful aristocrat's son in town. The police would obviously side with them, but not in this situation, so that's a little refreshing. So Christina leaves for home, and shortly after, Baron and Dr. Hertz arrive and offer medical attention to the crony that was cut. Hans leaves as well. He sneaks into Christina's room and professes his love for her, and they get it on. Back at the bar, the three jerks, they refuse to pay their bill. They leave. They basically threaten the landlord with, we're not paying, and, don't make my father revoke your license. On their way home, they stop at Christina's window and act like assholes, riling up Hans and making fun of her face. I mean, these guys are the lowest of low. They just can't let it be, so they're standing below on the balcony, catcalling up, talking about her face, Anyway, Hans gets really riled up, but no action's taken yet. Back at the lab, Baron Frankenstein and Dr. Hertz are still hard at work. It looks like they're releasing energy from a rock, and he does talk about that this is the key to capturing the soul. Cushing has a great line here. See, Dr. Hertz is speaking about how this is all magical to him, and Cushing replies, everything we don't understand is magic until we understand it, which is really how we look at things. The cronies return to the tavern, and they break in for a nightcap. They're not finished drinking yet. They want another round. Christina's father, who owns the bar, or the tavern, he finds that he's left his key behind, and he returns to find the men helping themselves. It's done through a nice little slow reveal, a little bit of tension built up. The three men attack and just brutally beat the innkeeper to death. The innkeeper is holding the coat that Hans had traded him earlier for the bottle of champagne, and we see that this is going to be the evidence trail that's going to lead to Hans's ultimate demise. So in the morning, Christina she's going to go see somebody who can help her, we're told, and she departs town. And shortly after she leaves, Hans is arrested for the murder. The coat is the evidence, and he refuses to tell the police where he was. He's, defending Christina's honor. He won't tell her that he was with her. It would look bad for her. Apparently in this town, the wheels of justice turn very quick, and the trial starts, I guess, the same day, and also ends the same day. The court scene is fantastic. It's some back and forth. The funniest part, though, is that Baron Frankenstein, he has no time for this. He's like, I need to get back to my work. You're wasting my time. This is ridiculous, silly. The jury instantly stands up and says, guilty, and he is sentenced to the guillotine just like his father. They also point out that he has, the son of a murderer, and he had the jacket, and that, there's some evidence that piles up, and it's enough to convict him in this time and place. Baron Frankenstein and Dr. Hertz decide, they need to steal his body and preserve his soul in order to transfer it to, a body at a later time. And Dr. Frankenstein has a great line here as well. He says, bodies are not an issue. As we've seen from previous outings with Baron Frankenstein, he can always find another body. The doctor, through some good old-fashioned blackmail, arranges with the jailer to procure the body once the execution has occurred in the morning. As the execution begins, Christina comes riding back into town in her carriage, literally the moment of the execution, and this guillotine must be right at the entrance and exit of the town because they're always riding past it in more than one scene. Christina sees that her love, Hans, is being executed before she can say anything. The blade drops, his head chopped off, and she immediately flips out, runs to a bridge, and throws herself off of it. It's like 10 feet high, but she manages to kill herself somehow off of this bridge. So as promised, the jailer brings Hans's body to Dr. Hertz, and they use a tuning fork and some satellite dishes in this lab of theirs, and they remove Hans's soul. And I guess they capture it for later use. We don't exactly see how this is done, but the tuning fork tells him exactly how to line up the satellite dishes, and the soul is removed. Christina's body is removed from the river, and she's, for some reason, brought to Dr. Hertz, and the mob that brings her says, isn't there anything you can do for her? And Dr. Hertz says, no, she's dead. And Baron Frankenstein says, perhaps we can try to revive her. Of course, now everything clicks, so we're going to get the soul of Hans being placed into the body of Christina, and that is the setup. Now, what's interesting is that this setup takes about half the movie, if not more than half of the movie. This is where we would, I'm guessing, see all of the scenes from the promotional posters. We get all of these cuts of Christina and Peter Cushing's character with her scantily clad as he's, doing all sorts of, he doesn't just place Hans's body in her. He actually changes her hair color and fixes her face and repairs the side of her body that's damaged. So some time passes and we get an awakening scene. No electricity, no lightning strikes, nothing of that nature. Just simply unwrapping and unmasking, and she wakes up and says, "Who am I?" They run some fine motor skill tests, and she's full of questions about herself, as you would be. The Baron forbids her to leave, though. Says, you have to stay here. You can't leave the house. They take Christina to the guillotine to see, I don't know, like a flashback memory, something, if she would put two and two together. And she screams, "Papa!" Hans, speaking through her, seeing the death of his father again. Now, here's what's interesting, is Anton, who I felt is the main antagonist, the main bad guy, he's the first to get his comeuppance. He hears Hans's voice as he's walking through the city. He runs from the voice, and he ends up back in the same tavern where they killed the original innkeeper. He starts drinking and playing cards with his friends, and he wants the company. He doesn't want to be alone. Plays some cards with his friends, and towards the end of the night, they leave. Anton starts becoming more agitated and frightened, and he doesn't want to leave. He eventually heads out, though, because the bar's closing up, and heads out on his own, where he meets Christina, and he doesn't recognize her. Christina is beautiful at this point, and she definitely uses that to her advantage. She lures him to an empty house, and that's how she explains it. There's a house right down the road that's empty. Would you like to join me? And of course he accepts. She goes to change. He hears Hans' voice again, and we instantly cut to a bloody guillotine being raised. We then cut back to the two remaining jerks. We've got Johann and Karl left, and they're discussing who killed Anton. Was it retribution for what we did? One leaves and one stays to drink. He's soon joined by Christina, and they have wine. He starts kissing her. She says, I'm going to go into the back for a moment. She goes into the back, finds a butcher knife. Then we hear Hans's voice speaking to Karl. We get this hard cut to her chopping wood, and then right back to Karl's body. At this point, the town is getting in an uproar, and the classic Frankenstein angry mob forms, and they start to figure out, like, something's happened. Somebody's brought back Hans from the dead, is what they feel. And only one person could have done that. It had to be that Baron Frankenstein. Frankenstein says, "Nope, I'm going to prove that it's not Hans doing this, so let's dig up his body." So they dig up Hans's body. His body's still there, but the head is gone. We then cut to Christina's room, and we see the head on Christina's, nightstand on her dresser, kind of stuck onto one of the posts. It's literally a cutout pasted on in this weird still, like literally they took a picture of his head, cut it out on a similar background or against the same background, and then tried to paste it on there. So Johann, he's out of here. He's like, the other two are dead. They're coming for me. Whoever is doing this, I gotta go. He goes, gets in his carriage, and lo and behold, who's in his carriage but Christina. So Christina, once again, does her seduction. The carriage that they're in stops all of a sudden, and Johann asks, why have you stopped the carriage? And the driver says, "Oh, a horse threw a shoe." We later find out that Christina had set this up. She says, "Oh, well, where we're going is just right through the woods here, so let's have a picnic along the way, and we'll just walk through the woods here." They go and they set up for a nice little picnic. Baron von Frankenstein realizes what's going on, so he starts chasing after him to try to prevent the murder from occurring. We cut back to Christina. She's got Johann in her lap, and she draws a blade and stabs him multiple times. When Baron von Frankenstein comes upon him, she has Hans's head. I wasn't too sure exactly. At first I thought she had cut off Johann's head, but then we see that no, she's actually holding Hans's head, which is this weird plastic mask, dummy looking head. It's really weird. Now granted, this head would have been decapitated for some time now. It'd probably be rotten, but this looks like literally a mannequin's head with a wig on it. It looks horrible. Baron von Frankenstein confronts her. She jumps up, she runs, and she does drown herself. Once again, jumping off of a 10-foot cliff into the river, and Frankenstein walks away as the credits roll. Alright, so that's the synopsis. Now, what did we think of this movie? Well, it's pretty good, alright? It's definitely not one of the top Hammer films. 6.6 on IMDb, 60% on Rotten Tomatoes. This was actually released as a double feature with The Shroud of the Mummy, which would have been awesome to see these Hammer double features back in the day. It would have been so much fun. Peter Cushing is a fantastic actor. Peter Cushing carries this. He is so charismatic. He is so fun to watch. He is such a joy on screen that I can watch anything with him, and I am totally pleased with the movie no matter what the outcome. Hans, he's a bit goofy, he's a bit dumpy. Susan Denberg, who plays Christina, she's really good. She's really pretty. She plays the role fantastic. And also Susan Denberg, she was in Playboy, I believe about 1 year prior to her playing this role in this movie as Christina. She was a Playboy centerfold. So yeah, she did play the role really well, and all the power to her. Now, there is this story that this is one of Martin Scorsese's favorite films, and I can't find that anywhere outside the IMDb fan facts trivia question section. So I don't know if it's true or not. It may very well be. I can see Scorsese, he likes some oddball stuff. Again, this is not your traditional Frankenstein movie. When I think of Frankenstein historically, I think of the grave robbery, stealing multiple body parts, stealing the brain, stealing the arms and the legs, and then stitching this corpse together and then reanimating it. This is not about reanimation. This is not anything of that nature. This is more of a soul capture that Frankenstein has moved on to. It's no more the physical, but more the metaphysical, the spirit, the essence of a human, and putting it into another human's body. So he's still playing God of sorts, yes, but it's not the traditional resurrection that we're used to seeing of Frankenstein. So in this aspect, it's a lot like a lot of the Hammer films. They've done the classic, and now they're reimagining the classic, taking it one step further. I think it's fantastic. It's definitely worth watching. If you're a Hammer film fan, go back and watch this one. It's well acted. Again, it's well shot. The beautiful colors, as with all of the Hammer films. And on that note, I'm going to be doing a lot of these Hammer reviews coming up because I'm a huge fan. My wife just got me a big set of them, so I'm going to be coming at you with a lot of more Hammer movies. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care.